Welcome in to the PFF NFL show, along with Sam Monson. I am Steve Palazzolo. We're back doing the whole video thing, Sam. They're putting us on camera for all these things, which means RIP to the podcast Nook. It's right over there.
Yeah,
you guys
it's behind
can't see
you.
it,
Can't
but
see
it's behind the camera. It's like the fourth wall or something like that.
The fourth wall.
Don't worry about it. Welcome. How you doing?
I'm good.
We were just having a little argument off camera that I
We've been
think is
doing that a lot
necessary.
today.
We've been bickering quite a bit, and I think that's what free agency does. The Darren Ravel thing.
Yeah.
You thought that was real.
That is what an unathletic white guy looks like playing sports.
Come on, listen.
That is what you look like doing a back pedal.
Darren Ravel realizes that he's become a bit of a joke.
Yes.
A bit of what am I looking for here? A joke, right? People razz him, and he's playing it off. Like, oh, I'm going to go for the steal.
He's playing it off by doing the thing in the first place. Yeah, sure, I'll go out and make a fool of myself playing basketball.
He wasn't
But that's what he
playing-
looks like playing basketball.
But then the way he gets all darted up with the headband and all that stuff.
Yeah,
and
that's the part of making himself look a fool. But making himself look a fool by actually doing the athletic pursuit was natural. That was like...
He wasn't really going for the steal
He
on
really
all those.
was.
If you guys saw the Ravel video, I feel like it's one of those, like, here's the Cowboys fan blowing up his living room after the Cowboys lose. That's all staged.
No, this was him trying to play basketball against somebody dramatically better than him and making himself look horrendous.
Well, we'll see what the people have to say about it. Anyway, we have a lot of free agency news. Sorry we haven't caught up yet. We're going to try to jam-pack it all in here. This is being recorded just before the 4 o'clock hour, so we're going based off of all of the legal tampering hearsay.
Just before free agency has happened, in fact. So
Yes.
free agency is basically over with everybody having signed.
Correct.
But it hasn't started yet.
So we feel comfortable enough giving you guys what has happened, knowing that there might be one of these, Frank Gore was supposed to be in Philadelphia. Hey, now he's in Indianapolis. So a few things could be outdated. But let's just roll through. Biggest news.
Well, we gotta hang on. We gotta pour one out for Joe Thomas.
Ooh, we do have to pour one out. I need a coffee mug.
About an hour ago, Joe Thomas retired officially. Some people claim to have known that for some time.
We need to actually pour something, and people can see us now.
Well, they can, yeah, but that will mean we'll actually mess up our studio, and that would be bad.
We used to fake it
Yeah.
when we weren't being recorded.
Shh, they don't know that.
Well, now they do.
I'm just saying, I'm not pouring coffee out over our rug and then try and clean it. I don't want
Smart.
to clean that.
So we're going to hypothetically pour one out
So,
in effigy.
yes, the greatest left tackle in the PFF era has called it quits. Joe Thomas was basically the benchmark for pass blocking left tackles for his entire NFL career. Looked up the grades recently. He has 2 of the top 4 offensive tackle single season PFF grades we've ever given. He has 3 of the top 10. Only one guy, him, appears in that list more than once, and he has 3 of those grades in the top 10. So
Yeah, he's awesome.
the term, first ballot Hall of Famer, future Hall of Famer, guaranteed Hall of Famer, all that kind of stuff, thrown around way too often, but Joe Thomas is that guy. I mean, he may be one of the best tackles to ever play the game. He is right up there with that Jonathan Ogden kind of all-time great group of guys. He's the current version of that, or at least was until he retired.
Yeah, and so the thing about Joe Thomas too, if there was a weakness to his game, you would say it's the run game. He wasn't a dominant run blocker for much of his career, but he was still very, very good in that regard. He was just at such a different level at the most important part of playing left tackle, which is pass protection. I did tweet out the stat that we worked together on this.
Collaborated.
On the tweet, right? I went back and looked. He had 30 career sacks given up in his 11-year career. That's 6,680 pass blocking snaps alone, and gave up only 30 sacks. Last year, his replacement was Spencer Drango, who stepped in and gave up 11 sacks in 11 games after Joe had given up 30 sacks in 11 years.
Yes.
Pretty good perspective.
Yeah, that'll do it.
So yeah, he was awesome. He was fun to watch. I'm gonna fire up some Joe Thomas film, I think, and just throw it on loop just to appreciate him.
Okay.
The kick step, the technique, everything. It was nice.
How did he finish?
See, I don't think he was a great finisher.
No?
Yet he's still going to go to the Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
Still going to go to the Hall of Fame because he blocked a guy when it mattered within the flow of the play extremely well. What's up, O-Line Twitter? We just love poking and prodding you guys. All right,
Steve
what we
shot,
got?
not mine. I just asked the question.
Oh, yeah, I took it. In honor of Renner, who's I out and about. Mike's still on
Special
personal,
assignment to the UConn.
special leave, personal.
Special assignment to the UConn.
Special assignment to the UConn is what we've established. All right, Mike's out away.
I don't remember where I stole that from, by the way. That's a line from something that I've thieved, and I have no idea where it was from.
Yeah, we're going to get sued again. All right.
Well, maybe they don't know what it's from either.
Let me run through our top free agents, the guys that we thought were the top available guys, the guys that have already, in theory, signed, and we'll discuss the news. So it's Drew Brees was our number one supposed unrestricted free agent. He's back to the Saints after a touch of drama because he at least had a small window where he could negotiate with other teams.
Yeah, it was kind of weird. Nobody expected Drew Brees to really hit the active market. He got close enough that actually it turned into a live thing. And what's interesting is that at that point he did receive offers of more money from other teams, only it doesn't actually appear to have done anything because he still took less money to stay home with the Saints, which is what people kind of expected he would do before free agency hit in the first place. So, the only real point as far as I can see of actually hitting free agency is that you get the bigger offers. You can then bump up your money for the Saints or just take the bigger deal elsewhere. He appears to have got the bigger offers and done nothing with it, which, maybe there was literally no point in that and they just took them longer to get the deal done in the first place.
I do think that the Saints, they're in this position where they can't completely break the bank for Brees because they do want to maximize his last 2 years, 3, whatever it ends up being, by building their roster. So I do think that they were trying to limit what they were going to pay him as much as possible, and I think they did stretch a little bit.
I mean, it sounds like
where they wanted to go.
It sounds like for them this is what we have, take it or leave it, and he ended up taking it. I'm just saying, it seems strange that they couldn't have got that done before the deadline, before exposing him to the legal tampering period to the point where he could get a bigger offer from somebody else. And then at that point, you're just relying on him not taking that deal and leaving you screwed.
Ultimately, I think it's the right move for Brees.
Yeah.
Go back to New Orleans and try to finish things up as they've done a much better job of building around you. All right, that's enough on Drew Brees. Our number 2 free agent was Kirk Cousins. Quarterback position, extremely valuable, and he's now going to be signing with the Minnesota Vikings, 3 years at $28 million guaranteed per year. So just discussing this contract in general, Cousins is being called a hero by fellow players, not only because of this contract, but the way he's played this whole thing, taking the franchise tag, not signing long-term with Washington, and now a fully guaranteed 3-year deal where he's still going to hit the open market now in 3 years, somewhat in his prime, and, potentially a hot commodity. Once again, is he playing this as well as anybody has ever played it?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, he's right up there with Darrelle Revis in terms of
Yes.
maximizing dollar value throughout his NFL career. We've talked about this earlier in the week on our YouTube video. If you search Pro Football Focus on YouTube, you'll find all the stuff we've been putting out there.
Good push.
I love this move for both sides. I was a little bit worried about it initially for the Vikings because with all the leverage Kirk Cousins had rolling into this free agency period, my take was that he would push for just this monster dollar value. He would be the guy that comes out with this 6-year deal. That's my headset you're muting there. But
oh, wow.
Knock yourself out.
We're on opposite sides here.
Yeah. There you go. That's yours. Now. Beautiful.
I had to cough.
Yeah.
And I pressed the wrong cough
Well done.
button.
This is how the sausage is made.
We're on the tip of...
scratching the surface of professionalism here at PFF.
That was said to us recently.
Yeah, by the guy that's helping us do all this.
Yeah.
Nice. So I figured he would be the guy to get the 6-year, $100+ million deal, the contract that resets the quarterback landscape and pushes it up into the stratosphere, $30+ million a season, because he had the leverage to ask for it, especially after turning down Washington's overtures, not wanting to sign with them, the deal that Jimmy Garoppolo got. It all looked like that was the way it was heading. But actually what they did is they used that leverage to go the other way and say, okay, we don't want the huge contract numbers. We'll take $28 million, the sort of the standard at the moment. We'll stay in the Jimmy Garoppolo range, but now we want it all guaranteed. There's going to be none of this fake money at the end of the contract that we may or may not see. 100% guaranteed deal, just like the NBA, and 3 years so we can hit the open market again in 3 years' time. I speculated a few years ago that somebody might try this. When Andrew Luck's contract was coming up, if you need a quarterback in today's NFL, you are just sunk. So the next quarterback that's coming up for a negotiation has like 100% leverage. They can basically ask for whatever they want.
So save the silly money
So
for more guaranteed money.
I speculated that the next guy to come up might try getting a fully guaranteed deal.
Right.
So whatever the final number is, I want 100% of this guaranteed, and there's nothing you can do about it. You don't have any leverage to turn it down because I walk out of this building and you're a 4-win team for the next 5 years until you find a replacement. But that's basically what Cousins did. He used that leverage to get a 100% guaranteed deal out of the Vikings. For him, it's a great move. It's all guaranteed, and he can hit free agency in 3 years' time. But it actually works for the Vikings, too, because they don't have to pay that monster contract that we were expecting, which was going to squeeze their salary cap for the next 5-6 years of him being on the roster. Now they can do the 3-year deal. It's still big money, but it doesn't choke that team in terms of salary cap management the way it could have done. So they can still build a championship caliber roster around Kirk Cousins. And even if he isn't the best quarterback in the league, you're still in business to win over that 3-year window.
And I wrote a pretty extensive piece on Cousins and what I think it means for them in the part that you're talking about, the building around him. I think that's the key part here. I think the debate is he elite? Is he top end? Is he worth this type of money? I think you have to wrap your head around the fact that he's probably a mid-tier quarterback, maybe on the upper part, just above average or just above that number 15 rank. Is he the 12th best quarterback in the league? In that range. And from PFF grade standpoint, he's ranked between 9th and 19th in each of his 3 starting seasons. And I think a lot of those rankings and his stats in particular are dependent on those around him. So I'll let you guys go read it over at profootballfocus.com. It lays out some of the numbers a little bit more in depth, but I think the big takeaway for me is I think going into any given year, he's an upgrade over what you can expect from Case Keenum. But at the same time, there could be a year that lands right where Case Keenum was last year, which was 9th in PFF grades and a good quarterback.
Yeah.
So that wouldn't be a surprising outcome for Cousins. I think he has a chance to just put up bigger stats in that system.
So we talked about it before that if you look at those 4 guys, the 3 the Vikings were letting hit free agency and Kirk Cousins, they all had overall PFF grades in more or less the same ballpark if you looked at their best seasons. The difference is that I think Kirk Cousins is the more consistent guy. He's had 3 years at about that kind of level. And also, he doesn't have the question marks that the other guys have. So there's no catastrophic injury like you had at Bridgewater. There's no degenerative lists of injuries like you have with Sam Bradford. And there's no, is it just 1 year like you have with Case Keenum. So it's maybe not a massive upgrade any given year, but the chances of repeating that year should be massively different.
Yeah, the other point that I made, too, is all of those, since 2014, Bridgewater, Bradford, and Keenum have all been guys who are really low in that big-time throw percentage ranking and, the positively graded throw ranking. So that's essentially quarterbacks adding value and making plays down the field, but they've always been really good at avoiding turnovers. So whether that is a conscious decision by Minnesota to get these more game manager type quarterbacks to play off their defense, that's one thing, or you're going to get Kirk Cousins now, who's been a little bit higher in big time throws, but also higher in turnover worthy throws. So he's going to add more value to your team, maybe be a little bit more risky with the ball. But I like that because with that aggressiveness, when you have Adam Thielen, when you have Stephon Diggs, when you have all those playmakers, it can be a much more explosive offense.
Yeah, so the grading for all those 4 guys has been in the same ballpark, but how that grade is comprised is different stylistically with those QBs, and that can be significant when you're talking about a guy that is capable of going on a big run and doing maybe an Eli Manning in 2011, a Joe Flacco when he got hot, won them the Super Bowl.
That's right.
Cousins is capable of elevating his play to that kind of level, particularly when you're talking about teaming him with Diggs and Thielen, who were both top 6 in terms of contested catch rate last season, winning those contested catches. If you got a guy willing to put the ball in the air a little bit more, that could be huge for them.
Right. And the last thing I'll say about Cousins, I know statistically he's really, really good. You can line him up when it comes to passer rating and yards per attempt. In his 3-year stretch is outstanding, but I think when you compare his stat rankings, where he ranked in passer rating compared to where he ranked in PFF grade, there's a difference there. He's been better, ranked 5th in passer rating and then 7th, and he was 13th or whatever, which each year was pretty much lower than his PFF ranking, showing that there was some level of help from his playmakers or some level of luck, which is fine, because you're just trying to get to that end result statistically, and I think that they have the same playmakers to be able to do that in Minnesota. All right, let's go on. I'm just going to go through our list right now. Well, here's the other big news, right? Ndamukong Suh
Cuts.
going to get released. Okay, so we slotted him in to our free agent. He's our best non-quarterback free agent.
Well, he's going to be the best guy left on the market, because
by far, because all these other things
everybody
have
else
happened.
signed before the market is even opened.
So I wrote up Suh again. Same thing. You have a 31-year-old hitting maybe the back end of his prime, but still in his prime, coming off his 3 highest-graded seasons of the PFF era. A slight decrease in pass rush productivity last year, but still very, very good in that department. An outstanding run defender. I think he's scheme diverse, and somebody's going to get a guy that could be a game changer up front.
Yeah, it's kind of ironic because when he signed that contract in Miami, it was so huge that right from the outset you were like, there's basically nothing he can do to justify that deal. Like, he would have to turn into J.J. Watt or Aaron Donald to be worth that kind of money. And actually, like you say, 3 best seasons. He has been better every year in Miami than he ever was in Detroit. So if anything, he has been more than the player they could possibly have expected him to be coming out of Detroit when they signed him. It was just such a monster deal that it didn't matter. And in the end, they had to cut bait and walk away from it because they just couldn't afford what that contract was doing to their roster.
So here we are, first day of free agency. And we always overreact to these contracts, right? That's what we did with Suh a couple years ago. But it was definitely inevitable that he's not going to see the life of it. He's not going to make it to the end. And, when you get those big high-end deals that aren't guaranteed, fully guaranteed like Kirk Cousins, there is this inevitable see what you can get out of it and then bail. So this probably isn't that big of a surprise that Miami is bailing at this point.
No, I think it was inevitable. This is exactly how this thing looked like it was going to play out from the moment they signed it. They will keep him on the roster for a few years. We'll see if he can play better than he did in Detroit, and then eventually we're going to have to get out of this because it's going to squeeze the cap too much for us. So, yeah, I think that makes total sense. You want to just run down this list of free agents, but I'm going to throw an audible at you. Let's do the QB dominoes. Let's start taking them
Let's
off.
talk
Yeah,
QBs.
Drew Brees go. Kirk Cousins went. That wasn't actually the first domino that fell. That was Case Keenum to the Denver Broncos. What do you make of that deal?
So we had 2 years, 18, 20 million
Somewhere
per.
it was, in the $18 to $20 million range.
So I don't hate it. So the biggest thing when it comes to Keenum is I'm all about a roll of the dice and seeing, was last year an anomaly or was it real? I'm all about rolling the dice and trying to bring him in and duplicating that or seeing if he can build off of it while keeping the flexibility to get the next guy in there. I think this deal does that.
Yeah, I like the deal. I think it makes sense for them. It's in the right kind of dollar range for that kind of quarterback. Basically, you've got the top of the market. If you're absolutely certain you've got at least a viable Super Bowl caliber winning quarterback. And by that I mean anyone in the top 10, 15. Any of those guys are capable of winning a Super Bowl, like Cousins. If you got that guy, the market is now up towards $30 million a year. If you don't have that guy, if you've got a guy with question marks, the market is now somewhere around $20 million a year. So Sam Bradford, Case Keenum.
It's amazing.
It's a $20 million deal. Basically, if you have a guy you think maybe can get to that level, but you've got a major question mark about it. That guy's earning $20 million a year now. That is the QB market, the insanity of it. So I think this makes sense. It's the right kind of money. Let's analyze for a minute what is the situation around him compared with Minnesota last year? Because, we all talk about this is the best supporting cast Keenum had, therefore he played at his best. In Denver, he definitely doesn't have the same weaponry as he had in Minnesota. They don't have a Diggs and Thielen. They have Demaryius Thomas, whose option they picked up. They've got some weapons there, but they're not nearly the same caliber.
Right.
But perhaps the biggest problem has got to be that offensive line, right, where you still have major issues at the tackle spots. Garrett Bowles at least should shore down relatively one side, but you still have the right tackle situation to deal with. The thing, though, is that Minnesota didn't exactly have a lights-out offensive line themselves.
Right. Make no mistake about that. And I was on Minnesota radio this week discussing that because all season we heard, the offensive line's better in Minnesota. It's better in Minnesota. Look at the sack totals. But Case Keenum was a magician at avoiding sacks. He was second best in the league at avoiding sacks when pressured. That is a skill. That is a legitimate, important skill.
That was Peyton Manning's stat for years. He always led the league in that stat.
So, there's general sack percentage, which is, all dropbacks, and a lot of times it's get rid of the ball before there's even pressure. That's where Peyton was really, really good. But when you're actually pressured, are you still avoiding sacks? So, Minnesota, the offensive line still gave up a ton of pressure. So, if anything, Case is used to playing in that type of situation, but it's not great in Denver.
And the other thing is, it was better, but there's a long way between better and good.
They crept back toward average,
Yes.
but they did not even get there yet.
No, so they gave up 198 total pressures in 2016, had a pass blocking efficiency of 75.5,
75.5.
which was 25th in the league.
Yep.
So in 25th, they climbed all the way to 13th in pass blocking efficiency and shaved basically 45 pressures off that over the season, which is good. But then the other problem they had is once they ran very late in the year and into the playoffs, they got banged up. And the starting five had to go into the bench.
Yeah,
and
add the
that's where
playoffs
big
into
problem.
there, Sam.
Add the playoffs.
I'm looking at your PFF premium right now.
Let's hit postseason. We'll apply.
Look at how cool this is. Now you
Now
can
we
go
gotta
to the
get the
season.
postseason
You can
stats.
tick. You
As
can
long
see you
as the
ticked every
internet
week.
survives in this little studio of
You
ours
ticked
here.
every week. This is good
Here we
podcasting
go.
as I stare at
Oh,
your
yeah,
computer.
Yes, that absolutely torpedoed them. They dropped from 15th down to 22nd
Thank you.
in pass blocking efficiency just by adding the playoffs.
So that's what Keenum was dealing with down the
So-
stretch.
and they only played in 2 games because they had a bye. So this team in 2 games dropped 7 places in pass blocking efficiency in the postseason.
Yeah, so he's kind of used to this whole deal. So,
But the point is, that was what made Case Keenum go from being fantastic to, is Case Keenum going to be the problem for this team? And by comparison, if you look at Denver over the whole season, including the playoffs, they ranked 30th in pass blocking efficiency, significantly worse than the Vikings, obviously, even with that playoffs, worse than Indianapolis, worse than Seattle, whose offensive line was a disaster, worse than the Jets. The only 2 teams that were worse than Denver last year in pass blocking efficiency were Arizona and Houston, both of whom might as well have just had sacks of sand out there pass blocking for their quarterback.
Sand. Sand can be good in pass protection, but
No, sand is good for anchoring and against the run. It's very bad for pass protection.
for straight pass
otherwise.
blocking.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thanks for clarifying that
Gotcha.
for us. So, yeah, the offensive line's worse. The playmakers are worse. I mean, Emmanuel Sanders is good, and Demaryius Thomas, I think he has his moments, but it's not as well-rounded of a group as what he had in Minnesota. So I would expect a step back from Keenum unless they can significantly upgrade around him. I don't think this keeps Denver away from drafting a quarterback. I still think they have to draft a quarterback to continue to develop.
Even up high?
Yeah, even up high. I don't care. Listen, I don't care that you missed on Paxton Lynch.
They do, though.
It doesn't matter. I'm making the decisions here. It doesn't matter that you missed on Paxton Lynch. You can't go and be like, well, we used a first-rounder on Paxton 2 years ago, so we'll just get a third-round pick who also will suck. You can't go in like that.
Well, you can't. But institutionally, these are guys, protecting their jobs. Can they afford to swing and miss again? This is the thing. That was Elway's quote, wasn't it? We're not done swinging and missing at quarterbacks. We're going to be aggressive still. Can he afford to swing and miss on a quarterback?
Oh, John Elway can do whatever he wants.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Even though he's starting to look a little bit like Gary Busey.
That's a whole different podcast, Sam. That's an
Oh,
entirely different podcast.
Okay.
All right, so Case Keenum's going to Denver. I still think they should be in the draft market. What was the next domino? We get the next Minnesota Viking to fall. Who was
Let's
the
go
next
Sam
one?
Bradford. Sam
Bradford.
Bradford signs with Arizona on a 1-year, $20 million deal with an option for another year at $20 million. So it's the test. Sam Bradford gets $20 million this year to see if his knee is functioning. And if his knee functions all the way through this year, we'll give him another $20 million for next year. So it is the rolling 1-year, $20 million contract for the guy with major question marks.
Can I sum this up real quick?
Yes.
I still just want to see Bradford with an excellent supporting cast because I do think he's an accurate quarterback. He's a little bit too on the conservative side. I want to see him with this really nice supporting cast because he's had years where he's graded well, but the stats haven't been great.
Yeah.
And he's never been that guy, we were talking about Cousins, where he's always been elevated by his teammates. We've never seen that from Bradford. And there might be something to, where does the quarterback fit in that?
Of the 4 guys, those Vikings options, Bradford actually had the highest single-season PFF grade of that group. So I think he's capable of the highest play of those guys.
But even his breakdown there was ridiculous because he was unbelievable at avoiding turnover-worthy plays. He was in the top 5 there, but he was like 32nd or something in positively graded throws. That was the year he set the completion percentage record that Breeze just broke, and it was just too far on the conservative end of the spectrum. But he did also make a high percentage of big-time throws. Like, he has the throws in his bag. He needs to be willing to pull the trigger. So I want to see him – I would have really liked to see him play out last year with the way Thielen and Diggs did play.
Especially the way he began the season.
The first game was incredible with the Saints. So I say all that to say this. We're going to have to wait another year before we maybe see Bradford in a situation where he has a good supporting cast because he's in Arizona with a disastrous offensive line.
Bags of sand.
And Larry Fitzgerald at wide receiver. And that's it. So we have a rebuilding Arizona team. Sam Bradford's going to be there. This is not the year I think we see Sam Bradford's best. If he's healthy.
Well, there's the thing, right? He has been consistently unhealthy with better pass protecting units than the Arizona Cardinals currently have. Does Sam Bradford make it out of the desert alive for next year?
No.
No?
Unlikely.
Dead? Gone?
That's why they're going to also sign
all of the offensive linemen?
Mike Glennon.
Yes. Hedging your bets in a major way. The team that had basically they ran into this with no quarterbacks on the roster, right? Byron Leftwich, their quarterback coach, has just been sitting in an empty room for the past couple of months, talking to himself.
You can't talk to the players anyway, Sam, but I won't take away from your joke.
Yeah, don't. It would ruin it.
I like to say that two bridges don't make a right.
Okay.
Two bridge quarterbacks.
That's,
Doesn't make sense. It's
no.
like it worked better on Twitter.
Yeah?
Bradford and Glennon, two bridge quarterbacks. Arizona has to draft someone too.
Oh, God, yeah. But they're in this horrible situation. Where are they, 15?
But
the top guys could be gone.
But I don't know if that's bad because now you're talking about Denver, who needs a quarterback. You already said they're afraid to pull the trigger. The Jets, will get to them because they're bringing in multiple veterans too. Maybe they're not going to draft somebody now.
Well, maybe, but
the
maybe
Bills are likely going to move up. But there are teams that are filling their quarterback holes.
So you're still going to get Cleveland. Have got to take somebody, right? With one of their top two. The Giants could do anything. They could still take a quarterback. Denver,
they could, but
maybe
things are trending toward the Giants not taking a quarterback.
New York Jets, maybe not. Buffalo looks like they're going up. If that happens, that's 5 gone, all before the Cardinals get anywhere near picking.
They might have to make a move, but they're at least in range.
They, I think, now that I'm trying to remember this, were one of 3 teams to send multiple representatives to Kyle Lauletta, the Richmond quarterback's pro day.
Who's sending?
Arizona. Multiple people. Not just one. Multiple people from the building. Maybe second round.
You know what I've always thought would be a great podcast / a terrible podcast? We just read off all of the visits. Yes.
That seems like a thing Mike could do. Once we get him back from the UConn.
When we get Mike back, he will read off
attendances of pro days.
Right. Or game. We'll track it during the season, too, and then save it for the end of the year. And it'll be like Josh Allen, October 9th, Wyoming at Air Force. And you just read off the 20 teams that were there. Yeah.
Nice.
I think that'd be just fantastic podcasting.
That's how we go viral.
Yeah. Let us know if you guys would really appreciate that. Next Vikings domino to fall after Sam Bradford was
Teddy Bridgewater. Teddy Bridgewater became the last guy left on the dance floor when the Jets were looking for a quarterback. They missed on Kirk Cousins. They missed on everybody else.
Did we get terms on that?
The Bridgewater deal? I haven't actually seen numbers on that one yet. They took Bridgewater. They then re-signed Josh McCown as well to go back to the Jets. So their quarterback situation is now Josh McCown. It's the same as last year plus Teddy Bridgewater, and still a guy likely to come in the draft because Bridgewater is fascinating. Because
why do you sign both Bridgewater and McCown?
Well, they're two completely different quarterbacks.
But if you're going to draft a guy,
the numbers are going to determine everything for Bridgewater because I had no earthly idea what his market is heading into free agency.
Did we get terms on that?
I haven't seen them.
Okay, I haven't either because
Google it there while I talk. There's a good lad. So I think the numbers will determine everything for Bridgewater because he could be anything. He could be anywhere from legitimate franchise quarterback upside to no knee, disaster, barely worth hanging on a roster, may stick there for a year, and then his career is over, essentially.
Upside.
So you sign Josh McCown just in case the Bridgewater thing is a total train wreck. So you know that Josh McCown, at least based on last year, can start, do a halfway decent job for you, act as a perfect bridge quarterback and a mentor for any young guy, and then the young quarterback, the rookie, will be your QB of the future. But if it does turn out that Bridgewater is back 100% healthy, if there aren't lingering after effects from that knee, and if he is able to play more in a more liberated style, being freed from that Norv Turner offense that sort of forced him into this check-down conservatism, you might actually have a franchise quarterback sitting there with him.
Yeah, all I'm seeing is 1 year deal.
So 1 year, it seems like exactly that.
And it's 1 year, $10 million for Josh McCown.
Yeah, so 1 year seems like exactly that. They've taken a shot on a guy who's upside, Upside could be huge, but the huge question marks. There are probably even bigger question marks surrounding Bridgewater than there are with Bradford and the guys that have question marks.
So I like this, though.
Yeah.
Because I think, with the Case Keenum thing, I think I know what Case Keenum is.
Well, this is the deal that I thought the Vikings should have made. Forget Kirk Cousins. Franchise tag Case Keenum. That's going to cost you $24 million-ish this season. And then you bring back Teddy Bridgewater on a 1-year, relatively cheap deal, I assume. Even if that was $10 million, like Josh McCown's. That is $34 million tied up in a quarterback, which is only a few million more than you've paid for Kirk Cousins. And you've got two guys that are capable of playing at that kind of level, one of whom may have even higher upside than that if he's freed from that system, is in a more modern NFL offense. And then you have a year to let those two guys battle it out and figure out exactly what you have in two different players.
So we like what the Jets did.
We did.
Okay. I do. I mean, I'm with that. And I would rather have Teddy on a 1-year deal, which I assume is not going to be a ton of money, versus maybe Keenum on the 2-year deal. So
I mean, this quarterback group was interesting heading into free agency, but in terms of upside, Teddy Bridgewater may have the highest of any of them because he had 2 very good years to begin his career. The guy's only 25 years old, and it was a catastrophic knee injury. It wasn't, it was a freak injury. It's not like this is a sort of long-term durability concern. It's just one catastrophic, horrendous injury that almost ended his career. But he was back on the field last year. The Vikings got him out there, albeit for some mop-up duty late in the season. But if he comes back and shows what he showed when he went down, that could be the best quarterback the Jets have had on the roster in years.
So I like that move. That's all good. So there weren't really any other QB dominoes other than maybe A.J. McCarron.
Yes, who's still out there.
So fought like hell to get to become a free agent.
And then the Browns went and traded for Tyrod, meaning his only suitor was now gone.
Right. So can we just look back real quick on this whole notion that this 4th or 5th round guy starts a game, looks half decent for half of a game, and then everybody starts tweeting about, well, they're going to flip him for a second, flip him for a first. I mean, that's A.J. McCarron.
Yeah.
He played a half of a good game on Monday Night Football. Everybody's going nuts.
No, he played a little bit more than that.
In any of the good games, my boy Chris Wesseling, I think, posted, any good game, the playoff game against Pittsburgh was terrible, and was terrible in one other game with the 2015 Bengals supporting cast that led Andy Dalton to 106+ passer rating, by the way.
Yeah.
This was one of the best supporting casts in the NFL in the last 5 years in the NFL, by the way. And he looked pedestrian at best. And all of a sudden, we're talking about a guy that was 2 years earlier drafted in the 5th round, looked below average with a great supporting cast. And then there's rumors about seconds and thirds and firsts and what's it going to do in free agency and all this stuff. Most recent rumor is that he's going to sign with the New England Patriots as a backup. He's a backup. He's worth a look as a backup. I'm all about rolling the dice, right? So I'm trashing him, but I'm also saying I would roll the dice on him as a backup, but not as a starter.
Yeah. So look, here's the thing with him. He had 2 good games. And then one disaster.
At San Francisco.
But if you cut it off
at
before
Denver.
If you cut it off before that Pittsburgh game, right? That is Jimmy Garoppolo's CV before he was traded.
No, because you watch the games, he wasn't even close to as good as Garoppolo.
He was pretty good for those 2 games.
He was not. He had the first half. He was good in the first half of the Denver game on Monday Night Football when he was working off the script.
He was pretty good in those 2 games, and then he played long enough for you to see that there was some really bad stuff in there as well. And it's not a coincidence that they basically didn't get him on the field after that point.
It's not great.
At that point, teams would have realized that actually he really isn't very good. So the Bengals were almost planning this the whole way, that we've shown just enough to get somebody intrigued, but any more and we're screwed. There's no trade value anymore.
It's just hilarious to me that a guy who, let me scroll up here on your premium here, 5th round pick, 164th selection, that he rolled in with 2 pretty good games, as you said. He now he has 2 pretty good games, and all of a sudden the NFL goes from valuing him as a 5th round pick to a 2nd round or a 1st round pick.
So much of this is media reporting and hype as well. Like it's like every quarterback that is a backup for the New England Patriots is worth a 1st round pick.
Ryan Mallett was going to net a 1st rounder.
Ryan Mallett was going to net a first. Brian Hoyer was going to be traded for a 2nd at some point.
Matt Castle did net a 2nd.
He did. But almost always it never actually materializes because what people are reporting is just bull. No, the league doesn't think that. It's just some guy being talked to by some lunatic.
Maybe that's
Here's
what I'm angry at.
Yeah, you're angry at reporters. Direct your
okay.
hate in the right area, Steve.
To be clear, I did promise to all of my Twitter followers this week. I said when I'm an NFL GM.
Yes.
Very
when.
confidently, I said when, not if. I said when. I promised that I would feed all sorts of crazy information.
What is my role when you're an NFL GM? What do I get hired to do?
That's to be determined. I'm not sure. I think you could still be my Twitter conscience. I think you've done a nice job.
You're going to take over an NFL franchise, and my role is your Twitter conscience.
Oh, yeah, because
that feels like I've been shafted somewhat in the hierarchy of this organization.
This is an extremely important position, Sam.
Really?
If you think about the level of power that I would be at and how important it is to not have a misstep on Twitter compared to now. I mean, I'm just a guy at PFF, right?
Uh-huh.
But if I am the general manager of a team, you cannot have a Twitter misstep. Now, I might only tweet 5 times a year, but I need those tweets to be succinct. I need them to be powerful, and I need to make sure that I don't piss people off. And there's probably going to be a lot of deleted tweets, or erased before you send.
Yeah.
That's you. That's where you step in.
Still, when you're running through the list of, the most important or most powerful people inside an NFL organization, how often do you see Twitter conscience, Twitter intern, helper on social media listed within, the top few positions?
Let me ask you this.
Uh-huh.
If our government perhaps had this position,
Uh-huh.
do you think it would be important? Do you think if the president of the United States right now had someone in this position?
It doesn't appear to be doing him a whole lot of harm at the moment.
I don't know.
I'm just saying, you take over
I'm keeping this political neutral. All I'm saying is our president tweets a lot, and some people like it, and some people don't. There probably should be somebody in between him and the keyboard.
You take over an entire NFL franchise, and the job you're giving me is basically an 18-year-old intern's job.
I'm not saying that's all you're going to do. That's your title. I'll defer to you on some cornerback evaluations.
So I'm going to be the Twitter intern who is also some form of scouting director, but just as a side gig.
No, not scouting director at all.
No?
No. We'll have someone else in that position.
Oh, I see.
You make a good cup of coffee, and we've had a lot of our listeners and we've had a lot of people requesting that job, Sam. And I think I've already got the right man for the job. So sorry, Lee. You're not going to be my coffee guy.
Well, I don't
Sam's
appear to
going to
be
do it.
coming out of this well. I'm now actively rooting against you to get a GM job.
See, if
you
were taking this the right way, you would say, you know what, there's still time for me to improve. There's still time for me to improve my standing in Steve's eyes.
No, I think this is a failure of your management skills.
Where are we on this whole thing? There's
so
much
QBs.
to talk about. It's
QBs.
almost time for free agency to break. QBs are done. Let's just go through some of these other guys. Is that fine?
Yeah, other big names.
Malcolm Butler,
fine.
Titans. What do you think?
I like the deal. Malcolm Butler had a bad season last year,
Yep.
but he was coming off a season in which he was PFF second-team All-Pro and improving. So his career arc up until last year, we got cameras now. Look, I can actually draw the arc. Career arc heading into last season was heading up to the All-Pro. Then it crashed, ending with that disaster in the Super Bowl where he was benched, played one snap, and it was on special teams.
A fascinating way that they're building the team in Tennessee. They'll start in the secondary, not this whole everybody from New England's going there, but Malcolm Butler, Adoree Jackson, Logan Ryan.
Tennessee Patriots.
Some athleticism back there, some versatility. Like what they're doing there. Let's stick with the Patriots theme. They also add Dion Lewis to pair with Derrick Henry. What are the fantasy implications there, Sam?
Stop it right.
Okay, what are the real football implications?
I like the secondary move. I think Malcolm Butler is a very good player who has a lot of good play on his track record, and they're banking on the fact that 2017 was an aberration, not the guy you're going to get going forward.
And it wasn't a disastrous 2017. It was
but also
fine.
it wasn't like it wasn't out of the blue. This was a guy they were talking about moving on from in the offseason. If ever you put stock in the idea of unsettling a player, he was unsettled heading into that season.
Correct.
So I'm okay with the idea that you give him a pass for last season. You look at the year before where he was an all-pro caliber player, and you pair him with Adoree Jackson. You've got some fantastic athleticism at that back end. You've got some really interesting coverage skills. I like that. Dion Lewis pairing with Derrick Henry is really interesting because I want to see if they have a plan beyond simply picking up ex-New England Patriots, if they've actually thought about how to team Dion Lewis with Derrick Henry, or if it's just, well, we've got our big bruising back and now we have our receiving back because he's small, which
Dion Lewis is much more than that.
He is, and I worry that is their plan, that they've just gone, well, this is our scat back and this is our ball carrier, and that's what we're going to do. I would love to see them run a more sophisticated, carry sharing system where you actually get Dion Lewis on the field over the first couple of downs. You let him carry the ball between the tackles, which he's shown he can do extremely well. He led the league last season in elusive rating, which is, broken tackles, it's yards after contact, it's all the stuff independent of the offensive line. You get him in there, and then, Derrick Henry splitting carries. You have that legitimate thunder and lightning change of pace, two completely different style guys, which I think there is something to that being harder to defend than simply two guys that are the same, or a similar style.
Right.
When you suddenly have to think, anytime they hand the ball off, what is coming at me? Is it, is it a juggernaut heading in my direction that I need to think about how I bring this down, or is it a guy who I need to work out how to break down and how to avoid getting made look stupid in a phone booth?
Offensive coordinator Matt LaFleur, more on that outside zone type of pedigree. If he does implement that, Derrick Henry gets downhill when you start outside, but it's really a downhill run when you're cutting back. Dion Lewis, I think, is just as good, like you said, inside or outside the tackles. I'm with you. Give them both the ball. I think they can both run the ball pretty well. And the NFL is all about multiple backs, and using both of them. Love what Dion Lewis can do, either split out as a wide receiver, but also just catching the ball out of the backfield. So nice pickup, I think, for Tennessee, giving Mariota some weapons.
Yep.
And Mariota, again, I think next year is going to be a big bounce back year for him. He was much better this year than the stats would indicate.
We got Andrew Norwell going to the Jacksonville Jaguars.
Some guard talk. He's good.
Some guard.
He's good. You wrote him up. And the guy moves well. He could pass protect. Slightly different scheme going from Carolina to Jacksonville, but I think he's still going to be fine there.
I want to give the Jaguars front office a lot of credit for this move, but then I want to take it back later on because they also signed DJ Hayden. The credit for this move, it would have been very easy for that franchise to buy into the hype that was surrounding their offensive line last season. They led the league in rushing. They led the league in rushing yards per game. They dominated the Pittsburgh Steelers on the ground in the postseason in a way we didn't see anybody do to that Steelers offensive line over the season. It would have been really easy to say, we got a pretty good offensive line. We're good, and roll on. But they actually recognized that, this really isn't a very good offensive line at all. Both running backs, Chris Ivory and Leonard Fournette, they combined for 380 carries. So their rushing numbers was
high volume. It was
a high volume thing. Both those guys averaged 2.5 yards per carry after contact. So they were doing a huge amount of the legwork in terms of generating that rushing yardage. And their pass protection was pretty ropey, even though they're a run-heavy team. So they went after an Andrew Norwell, by far the best offensive lineman on the market, really went hard to fix that. And I think he fixes the pass blocking and the run blocking equally well. If anything, in his career, he's been a better run blocker than he has pass blocker. But then last season, he didn't allow a sack or a hit all season, allowed 15 total pressures, including the playoffs, whereas the Jags guards combined for 55 total pressures over the year.
Huge difference.
So, and when you look at his tape, I love the way he blocks on the move. You get him pulling, you get him in space, either against defensive linemen, he's got the leverage and the power to do that, or against linebackers and defensive backs in space. And the Jags run that system. They run inside zone, they run outside zone. The two of those are their two biggest run concepts. They run those 62% of the time, I think. Norwell's the perfect pickup for that. I really give them credit for recognizing that as a weakness despite some of the base numbers.
I'll also say with Leonard Fournette, when he's running, I think what we might find over the next few years is he's as dependent on the offensive line as any other runner.
Oh, do you know what he is?
He's not Thomas Jones. No. Because here's the thing. You have to give credit Fournette for the way he finishes runs. When he gets that 3 to 4 yard head start,
he Thomas Jones with finishing.
Oh, yeah, with much more power. He does end with a little bit of anger, and he get that build-up speed at the second level on linebackers and safeties.
Is he early career Thomas Jones?
I don't think Jones was ever that.
Jones was good.
I'm not saying he wasn't good. I'm saying he was never this big, bruising Leonard Fournette type of back.
No, they're different styles, but the product is what I'm saying. You're going to get a guy who is going to get you what is there and then maybe run over somebody every now and again.
Well, that's what I'm saying Leonard Fournette is, because he's not trying to make guys miss, it appears.
And the thing is with that, right, the number of times where you execute that and actually run the guy over and break the tackle is minimal. Like the
but
biggest
it's not
play
about
he
that.
had,
But it's about it's about getting that extra 3 at the end of the run. So Nick Chubb, when you watch Nick Chubb run, we're doing our draft stuff.
he breaks
he's
tackles in a way for
he does. But I'm saying the way Nick Chubb finishes carries at the second level, he's falling forward for extra 2, for 3, for 4.
But sometimes Fournette doesn't even do that. That's the concerning thing. The biggest play, or his highlight play, was where he pointed out Mike Mitchell from the Steelers, ran it right at him, head down, just collision, right? I don't think he actually gained any extra yardage doing that. I think they both bounced off at like equal angles, and the run ended the same place he made contact. He just bounced sideways.
Small sample size there.
It is.
Either way, they're helping Leonard Fournette because he needs help. How's that? We got to go rapid fire here, Sam.
Okay.
Because so listen, if you guys want more in-depth analysis, it's all at profootballfocus.com.
That too.
It's also on YouTube, and we've done a bunch of quick-hitting videos on social media on all of these guys.
Yeah.
Allen Robinson, wide receiver. We called this a couple months ago to the Bears.
Love it. I mean, he's the best receiver on the market. The Bears desperately needed receiver help. It always made too much sense not to happen. Again, a guy they're banking on going back a couple of years to his best form.
2015, he was incredible.
In 2015, he was the best deep threat in the league, led the league in deep targets, I think, deep yards, caught an insane number of those passes, made bad quarterbacks look good, both in college and in the NFL. I like teaming him with Trubisky.
I like it a lot, too. He can run routes, and he's got those contested catch skills, so he's not a one-trick pony that you hate.
Yeah.
Nate Solder sounds like he's going to become the richest offensive lineman in NFL history.
Yeah.
So that might be a little rich for Nate Solder, but I still think you're getting a solid tackle in New York, especially when you talk about what the alternatives are in the market. There's nothing in free agency. They have the number 2 pick in the draft. There's no tackle that you really want to take at number 2, and you have Eric Flowers as your entrenched starter, coming into the season.
So that really is the saving grace of this move. It's that the alternatives across the board suck. You can't draft a guy to replace that, and the last time you tried, you got Eric Flowers. There isn't anybody after Solder in free agency. He was by far the best left tackle. The next guy is just probably not even a viable option at left tackle. There's a couple of right tackles out there. I think they've overpaid for a guy who I don't think is that good. He's okay. But that does represent a colossal upgrade for them over Eric Flowers, and was a move they probably had to make. So, yeah. Oh, all right move. I'm okay. I don't love it.
He's had his ups and downs in pass protection. One of the better run-blocking tackles in the NFL. So that's what you're getting with Nate Solder. Jimmy Graham, tight end, going from the Seahawks to the Packers. He will now have played with Drew Brees, Russell Wilson, and Aaron Rodgers. Pretty nice little haul there. Is this a better fit for Jimmy Graham? Because if you look at the Seahawks' career, they got some production out of him. Last year, they got the touchdown production out of him. They basically just made him uber red zone threat. Still ranked 32nd in the NFL in yards per route run, which is a great measure of efficiency. So 1.12 yards per route run. I think people think that he had a great year last year because he had all the fantasy production, the 10 touchdowns. He wasn't a great productive player, but in the red zone, he was just a, slant, fade weapon.
That's basically what he was. He was a red zone mismatch player for the Seahawks because it took them years to figure that much out. The Seahawks never had any idea how to use Jimmy Graham, and I think the way you use Jimmy Graham has actually changed over the years. He was this athletic freak in New Orleans earlier in his career. He was a guy they were able to use vertically in the slot, would run away from guys and then be able to go up and catch the ball over them. I think he's kind of broken down at this point that he's really not capable of doing that anymore. He doesn't fit that Seahawks Russell Wilson style of ad-libbing, the scramble drill stuff where you can just break open and make a big play. So he just wasn't a good fit in that offense. So it makes sense for them to move on. It's going to be interesting to see the fit in Green Bay because, Aaron Rodgers turned Jared Cook into this devastating weapon, finally realized his athletic potential. But he had the athletic potential. Aaron Rodgers was just the quarterback able to bring it out.
Right.
I don't know that Jimmy Graham has that athletic potential anymore. So we're going to see if Aaron Rodgers is capable of taking advantage of what he does well, which is contested catches, body control, all that stuff, and see if he will send him down the seam, either give him a jump ball over a linebacker or target him relentlessly on these back shoulder throws the way we always saw with Jordy Nelson. Just release him down the sideline, put the ball behind him, let him adjust to it, and you've got a 25-yard reception. It's possible he could turn Jimmy Graham into an interior version of that, or it's possible that really Jimmy Graham doesn't have all that much left other than being a mismatch weapon in the red zone.
I'm interested in that combination. Absolutely. The whole back shoulder deal. Aaron Rodgers really good at throwing it, and maybe a better fit for Jimmy Graham. All right, Sam Bradford we talked about. Tremaine Johnson,
Big Sky,
to the New York Jets. They like their length at corner. That's what everybody's talking about. He's a big, long corner. We gotta mention that. Big, tall, long corner. Play a lot of man coverage over there. Todd Bowles' scheme. Is that a good fit for him? Was he better in the Greg Williams scheme? His best years were in the Greg Williams scheme in St. Louis, 2015 and 16. Last year took a slight step back under Wade Phillips, who does play more man coverage. So are they getting an elite man coverage corner, a guy that's better in a more of a zone-heavy scheme? What are they getting in Tremaine?
Yeah, it's interesting. And I think he may end up just being a good, not great player consistently. These big, long corners are strange beasts because you almost naturally need those guys to be playing man coverage and press man coverage, because where they get into trouble is changing direction quickly in space, where you've got to break down, you've got to change, and you've got to get control over that bigger body. And that's often tough to do. So when these guys are at their best, if you think Richard Sherman in Seattle, the reason his 40 time was never a problem is because he always had his hand on the receiver and there was never any separation. He never let that guy be able to use his speed against him. He was always in phase and always had just enough contact to slow him down and just prevent him running away.
Why are you touching me?
So people can see. This is coverage right here. This is
so if
coverage.
we weren't doing this if we weren't simulcasting this on YouTube, I wouldn't be touched.
No, then I wouldn't touch you at all because people wouldn't be able to see.
We might have to go back to the old
coverage. So I think you need to use a guy like that either in press man coverage or in off coverage in zones where you get to just let him sit back and react to what's in front of him and use his athleticism that way. If you're just going to play him with off man coverage, you end up, I think, having problems or anything short underneath zones. But I think that is a good defensive scheme to see what he can do, and we'll see if he does have more in the tank.
Definitely a huge need for the Jets for a few years now, really just adding to that cornerback crew, and I think a worthwhile deal with Johnson. Sammy Watkins going to the Kansas City Chiefs. Now when you look at the Chiefs with Watkins on the outside, Tyreek Hill, Travis Kelce, man in the middle of the field, Kareem Hunt's coming out of the backfield, a lot of weapons for Patrick Mahomes now in KC.
Yeah, I mean, you are trading Albert Wilson for Sammy Watkins, essentially, within that offense, and giving Patrick Mahomes an extra guy to throw to.
Going to be 25 on opening day, so still very young.
Yeah.
Has one really good year under his belt. That was 2015. That was Tyrod's first year. That was Tyrod's best year throwing the deep ball. And I do think Watkins is still a capable deep receiver with his speed. I don't know that he's ever going to be that pure all-around threat, but a deep receiver opposite Tyreek Hill as a deep receiver, that's dangerous.
Yeah, so his deep numbers last year were pretty ugly, but there were a lot of a lot of badly thrown deep balls from Jared Goff. I think his part of that was better than the numbers suggest. And actually he had the highest wide receiver rating of any of those Rams receivers. So Jared Goff's passer rating throwing to him was better than it was to any of the other guys, including Cooper Kupp. Having said that, I do think it's significant that he's basically the only player not to have a career year within Sean McVay's offense, which would be a worrying thing if I just paid the kind of money that the Chiefs paid him.
That is a curious thing because you're talking about, Deshaun Jackson was a great deep threat there. And was it just Goff and him didn't get on the same page? Did they not feature him? Because the Rams, there are a ton of weapons. There's just a lot of different weapons. Robert Woods and Kupp and all these different guys, all the different tight ends that they had coming in and out. So was it a spread the wealth type of system? Todd Gurley did a ton out of the backfield catching the ball. Was it because they're spreading the wealth, or is it because Watkins just didn't take to the system, or he just wasn't that good? I think we'll find out. But I still think at least his deep threat, I'm not saying he's Torrey Smith, just a decoy, but at least the deep threat. Think about how Kansas City used Tyreek Hill last year. We talked about with Alex Smith. As soon as he had man coverage, they're going deep. And they were aggressive with that. Now, you can't just lean coverage to Tyreek Hill's side.
Yeah, so the NFL often operates as like a year lag in terms of reacting to something. So last season, Tyreek Hill was basically all of their deep targets. He had 20-something deep targets. The next highest wide receiver, I think, was 4 with Albert Wilson.
Right.
Maybe it didn't hurt them last year because teams didn't react, but they're going to this year. Like, you're going to see teams go out there with job one.
Yeah, they're game planning for that.
Job one is to take away the deep targets to Tyreek Hill. So they need to have a more balanced distribution of those deep targets this year than they did a season ago. And Watkins can definitely help you address that balance.
Completely agree. Like what they're doing there in Kansas City on the offense. All right, a few more to just run through. Weston Richburg, he's going to go to the San Francisco 49ers. It's a health issue with him. When he's healthy, one of the better centers in the league.
Yep.
Interesting fit for their zone-heavy scheme under
nice
Kyle
fit,
Shanahan.
I think, for that zone scheme.
Yeah, I think he could do it all. We talked about Keenum, Deion Lewis we discussed. One other name I want to mention, Prince Amukamara. By reports, it's going to be a 3-year deal, I believe, with Chicago. He's been the guy we talked about. He's just 1-year deal, 1-year deal, 1-year deal. Always plays that solid high 70s, low 80s football. Finally has a long-term deal with Chicago, and they needed it because if he walked, they have massive holes at cornerback, and I think that's a solid deal for the Bears.
Yeah, we said it before. He is a solid to good cornerback. You can do an awful lot worse than Prince Amukamara as a starting cornerback in this league. So I think it's only fair this guy gets locked down, at least for a couple of years. Who else? We got one more that I wanted to talk about. Oh, yeah, Jerick McKinnon. Jerick McKinnon signs a pretty rich deal in San Francisco, but I do love the fit of McKinnon within that offense, that Shanahan system.
Yeah, that outside zone scheme, probably a good fit. Maybe a little rich.
I think so, but
though.
he's also really good as a receiver out of the backfield. He is a complete every down back potentially. He does have receiving skills. This past season, he's a little bit like Case Keenum in terms of one-season wonder. He was so good this past year in Minnesota, and we really hadn't seen him do that before. And it wasn't for want of attempts. He had the opportunity. He just hadn't done it before. So I think there's a degree of concern there about whether he's going to back it up as an every-down guy. But I do like the schematic fit there.
Running through a couple other things. Muhammad Wilkerson, we had him apparently very low on our free agent rankings. That needs to be fixed. But Wilkerson going to the Green Bay Packers, 1 year, $8 million is the report, and he's actually on our list twice here, Sam. We might want to fix that.
We might want to fix
that. At his high end, you made the point in our video, he's 6 years removed from his best season, which was 2012. But his best season, he's been a top 10 interior defensive lineman in 3 different years of his career.
So he was the guy where you look at either J.J. Watt or Aaron Donald, and you're like, if those guys weren't in the league, we would be talking so much about this guy.
Yeah,
because he's basically the next best guy in the league.
It was him and Calais Campbell.
So,
and
Calais
this next
Campbell
tier
has
of guys.
done it. Justin Smith had done it.
Yep.
Muhammad Wilkerson for that 1 year was the next guy. If you take if you take Watt or Donald out of the equation, this guy would be getting so much more press. But he just he looked insignificant compared to those two guys. That's just how good they were. But yeah, we are now 6 years removed from his best season, and that was in his second year in the league. There's a big kind of how much does he care question mark with him. At his best, he was an extremely versatile guy, played all along that line. Even this past season, it was like 75 snaps and nose tackle, I think a couple of hundred inside and a couple of hundred outside. He was playing still all over that line. He's a versatile guy. The question is, can you discover that form again, or has he just checked out?
Yeah, I mean, so that is the big question. But when you talk about if you can get the most out of him, and if it is an effort thing, and now he's more motivated playing for Green Bay, playing next to Kenny Clark, Mike Daniels, man, that is potentially a scary defensive line.
He's saying there's high upside here?
I'm not saying that.
No?
But there's potential. There is potential in there. Carlos Hyde looks like he's going to the Cleveland Browns. You guys haven't sent me the nugget. Send me the nugget that came out of the PFF free agency guide that I wrote about Carlos Hyde.
Nobody sent you that?
Nobody sent me his the pass game nugget that I put into the bullet points on Carlos Hyde. Send me a tweet at PFF_Steve with a little screenshot, because I think it's a good one. Carlos Hyde, a solid addition for the Browns. Anything else, Sam? There's so much to do. We're going to wrap it up. So at the end of the week, we'll do a little, from a team standpoint, which teams really we think helped their cause, hurt their cause, whatever it might be.
No, I think we're good. That's our initial free agency roundup, and now we'll see who pulls the Frank Gore and bails in their contract.
But yeah, hopefully nothing becomes outdated here. Thanks for tuning in. Please get to ProFootballFocus.com. Check out Edge and Elite and all of Sam's writing and my writing and all the fun stuff.
Pour one out for Joe Thomas.
Oh, we're going to pour.
We got water, yeah. Actually, pour it out since we're on
This is for Joe Thomas. You're cleaning this up, Mike? Yeah. Taylor would never clean this up. This is good. For Joe Thomas, a great career.
Pouring one
Thanks
out.
for all you've done. 30 sacks in 11 years. You're one of the best ever. Hall of Famer, Joe Thomas. Boom. Yeah, it's wet. We'll try that up. Thanks, guys.